if we have two numbers, a and b, and a times b is 0, then either a is 0 or b is 0. Or both, of course. 0 times 0 is also 0, right? But if two numbers are multiplied together to get 0, one of them has to be 0. That's the important thing. Another way to say this is that if a is not 0, then b has to be 0 for this to be true. If b is not 0, then a has to be 0 for this to be true. And you can kind of see this, you can kind of understand it intuitively, but let me just prove it for a minute, just so there's no shadow of a doubt that this property is true. And the reason I want to prove this so carefully is because you're going to be using it a lot when you solve equations by factoring. Okay, so what I said was that if a is not 0, then b has to equal 0. Well, I have ab equals 0, and let's just assume a is not 0, because what we're trying to prove is that if a isn't 0, b has to equal 0. Let's just divide both sides by a, and we can do that since we've assumed a is not 0. And what do we get? This cancels. 0 over a is 0, so we get b equals 0. Now let's assume that b is not 0. So we've got ab equals 0. And now we can divide both sides by b. 0 over b, ab over b. b over b is 1, so we've got a equals 0 over b is 0, so a equals 0. Alright, so we've just proven that if a is not 0, b has to equal 0. And if b is not 0, a has to equal 0. That's the zero product property. If a times b is equal to 0, then either a has to equal 0 or b has to equal 0, or both. That works too. Thanks.